Boris had an older brother named Dima. When Irina and Boris decided to get married, Dima suggested a double wedding. Irina, Boris, himself, and his bride. Since Irina had no specific plans for the celebration, she thought it was a great idea. However, the plan was never realized because Dima's fiancé left him, accusing him of cheating. Irina was shocked. She found it hard to believe that Dima, who seemed so reliable, turned out to be a traitor. She even refused to communicate with him at first because of her harsh judgment. Boris saw Irina's reaction as a positive sign. He believed that if she condemned the traitor, it meant that she would never do the same thing herself. It gave him confidence in their already strong relationship. Now, 5 years after the incident, Irina had become calmer. She no longer avoided communicating with Dima and refrained from saying bad words to him when they met. Boris was pleased that two important people in his life again found common ground. On Saturdays, Irina worked until lunchtime. One day, coming home, she caught her husband cleaning. "I was cleaning and found behind the sofa a sock without a pair, but I don't have socks like that in my drawer," Boris said. Irina looked at him reproachfully and said, "I must have thrown it away already." They both laughed, threw the sock away, and forgot about the situation. Irina was pleased that her husband had not remembered that he had never had such socks, and she promised herself to be more careful from now on. Boris had had a difficult month at work. Twice he was delayed on business trips, and instead of 1 week in a foreign city, he had to stay for 3. In the evenings, he and Irina had the usual telephone conversation, during which they shared stories about their day. Irina told about interesting events at work, about customers they had encountered in the store, and about funny moments that had happened behind the scenes. These stories brought relief to Boris, for he was looking forward to getting home soon. On Friday night, Boris and his partner hosted Dmitry at their home. They drank 2 bottles of wine and laughed a lot. Boris enjoyed being at home surrounded by his favorite people, and it warmed his soul. Tired of the men's political debates, Ira went out on the balcony to smoke, and a few minutes later Dima joined her. "I saw you yesterday in the city center," he said. "Why didn't you come over?" Ira smiled, to which Dima responded with a note of mockery that made the smile disappear from her face. She looked at him fearfully, her hands trembling. "Is it true that at a funeral, the loudest person who cries the loudest is the murderer? Is that why you despise me so much, deflecting suspicion with petty accusations?" Dmitry boldly stated with a smirk. Ira begged him not to say anything, afraid of what it would do to her marriage. She promised that it wouldn't happen again, but Dima set a condition. He had feelings for her and demanded intimacy in exchange for silence. Shocked, Ira reluctantly agreed to Dima's conditions, as she saw no other way out. She interrupted communication with her lover and anxiously waited for the consequences. Unaware of her intentions, Dima had long been hatching an insidious plan. For the last 2 weeks, Boris had been absorbed in the office, completing an important project. Many employees, including Boris, for the sake of the project temporarily moved to their workplaces, which caused some dissatisfaction between the spouses. However, Ira, realizing the importance of Boris's work for their family, refrained from indignation. She was not the type to cause drama at all. On Wednesday, Ira had the day off, and in the afternoon she received a call from Dima. He reminded her of their agreement and informed her of his upcoming visit. To build up her courage, the woman decided to have a few drinks before meeting Dmitry. She doubted that she was making the right decision. Perhaps she should confess everything herself, as the band-aid came off quickly but painfully. Dima was still gone, and the bottle of wine was almost empty. Finally, when the hand of the clock approached 5 o'clock in the evening, the doorbell rang. Dmitry stood on the threshold and grinned mischievously. "I see you're prepared," he grinned, eyeing a slightly tipsy Ira. She gave him an angry look and let him into the apartment. It turned out that Dmitry had brought more wine, and Irina didn't refuse another glass. They both indulged in their drinking. By the time Dima made his move, the woman was already quite intoxicated, which made him seem attractive and malleable. Boris finished the job just in time. The project was almost finished, and only a few of the employees involved in its delivery were still in the office. He was happy to go home, looking forward to a warm family evening. However, an unpleasant surprise awaited him at home. There was a light on in their damp apartment. Borya grinned to himself, remembering how his wife was afraid to be alone, and therefore turned on the light wherever she could. With that thought, he headed home. But the words stuck in his throat as a disgusting scene unfolded before him. On Borja's chair, where he liked to rest after a long day's work, sat his brother Dima, and kneeling in front of him was a naked Irina. "Hello, trouble," his brother smirked. These words ignited a fire of anger in Boris. He lunged at his brother, pushing his wife away. A scuffle broke out between the men, and Ira tried to separate them. She almost succeeded, but her husband pushed her away again. "Yes, I saved you," shouted Dmitri. "Saved me from what?" exclaimed Boris. "From your unfaithful wife. She slept with another man, okay, and she judged me." Boris collapsed to the floor, leaning his back against the sofa. He listened to Dima's incoherent words, keeping his gaze fixed on Ira sitting across from him, her arms wrapped around herself and pressed against the wall. "Is it true?" he asked his wife, to which she simply nodded. Boris dropped his head in his hands in response. The three of them sat in silence, each breathing heavily. Finally, Borya broke the silence with a question addressed to his brother. He could not understand why Dima had decided to do exactly that instead of informing him directly about his wife's infidelity. It seemed to him completely meaningless justification, the desire to reveal the truth in person. Boris lashed out at Dima in anger, cursing, and forcibly kicking him out of the house, warning him of dire consequences if he returned. When Dima left, Boris found Ira already dressed, with eyes swollen with tears. He made it clear that forgiveness was out of the question, both for her and for his brother. Perplexed as to why Irina would collude with Dmitri, she admitted her mistake and agreed to leave his apartment as soon as she found another place to live. That's how it was settled. For 2 months, Ira did not leave the apartment and did not pack her things, which led Boris to think of a deliberate ploy to delay the time in the hope of reconciliation. Determined not to give up, he took charge and found an apartment for her, paying the first month's rent without hesitation. His peace of mind outweighed any financial concerns. After Ira's departure, he breathed a sigh of relief, resigned to his upcoming bachelorhood. Irina, on the other hand, even after years, had difficulty finding a suitable partner. Her attempts to start a new relationship ended in heartbreak, and the prospect of marriage arose only once, an engagement that ended abruptly when her soulmate absconded with another woman, leaving Irina with lonely apologies on social media. Betrayal became her greatest fear.